Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Jordi, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Jordi, you are the co-founder of multiple companies, among which Curated, which has procured over 600 vintage supercars and paired them with the world's best collectors. Can you tell us how you met your partner, John, and how the act of kindness from Alan Lazowski changed the trajectory of your life and business?
Of course, of course. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. I'm from Barcelona, from Spain. In 2012, at age 29, I decided to move to the United States. I had an opportunity. A friend of mine had a company here. It was a car rental agency in Miami. And that company was not doing great. And he asked me if I could come to Miami as a consultant to help him and figure out the situation, if they were going to close the company or if they should continue. So I moved to Miami to help my friend, my best friend Gerard. And after like a couple of weeks here, like he came back with his general manager, and we decided that it was best to try to continue. And they asked me if I was willing to do this. So I was 29, I was single, and I always wanted to have an experience to live abroad. And of course they said yes. So I decided to stay there here in Miami and lead that company. 7 months later, we decided to sell that company to the largest car rental agency in Miami and one of the largest in the United States. The name was Lullaby. So Lullaby, the president and founder of Lullaby, it was John Tamarian, which is my current business partner at Curated. I met one of John's business partners and they fall in love with our project. Lullaby at the time, they had a rental agency and our concept was a little bit different. It was more a membership program. So basically you were buying a membership between like $25,000 and $50,000. You were getting points and then you were getting access to a fleet of cars. So instead of owning a Ferrari that depreciates 30% a year, now you spend $20,000, $30,000 a year and you get access to a Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bentley, whatever you need. Depending on your needs. So that's what Lullaby loved. So that's why they decided to acquire our company, to acquire the members. So now they had the daily rentals and the membership program. So I had the opportunity to meet John, like one of his business partners. I met one of his business partners. He made the deal happen. I actually met John the day that we were signing the deal. So after that, I started like working with John, and that's how John and I met. We'll talk. I'll go to how we met Alan as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the relationship with John a little bit later. But it was at the beginning was a little tough. We were two young kids with a lot to prove, to the world, and there was some conflict between us, because of egos and insecurities and a lot of fears. But we started working together, and at some point we had the opportunity. John is a marketing guru. He's amazing. So at some point for Art Basel Miami in December 2014, he put together an event. It was Lullaby and Pininfarina, that is the brand that designed Ferraris. They're super famous. They designed Ferraris forever. So Lullaby and Pininfarina presenting Mr. Brainwash, that is a super famous pop-up artist. And this guy was painting live one of the cars that we had in our fleet, that it was a Maserati designed by Pininfarina. So that night, it was so crazy. We had over 1,000 people in our showroom, and Mr. Brainwash was like painting, basically was throwing paint on the car. And like there was paint everywhere, people were stepping on the paint. So imagine like our bathrooms, our walls, everything was like, it was a disaster. It was full of paint. So, but it was like a super famous event. It was one of the top 10 events in Miami in December 2014. So the next day we're in the showroom, John and myself, and there's this gentleman that out of nowhere, like he opens a door and he walks in and he's like, oh my God, this is crazy. He starts screaming, this like short guy, like with flip-flops and shorts. And he starts screaming, somebody that we've never seen in our lives. He comes to me, he gives me a hug, like crazy hug, like, and then he's like, oh, you have an accent. Where are you from? And he gives me his business card, and it was a parking ticket that I had never seen, that parking company. So I was like shocked, John and I were like, what's going on here? Who's this guy? So he was the founder and owner of Last Parking, LEZ Parking. At that that day we didn't know who he was, but then we did a Google search that night, and he was the owner of Last Parking, the largest parking company in the United States, with 15,000 employees and 2 billion in revenue. So which was crazy. So that's how we met. That's how we met Alan, actually.
And tell me about the unfolding of the relationship and the challenges that you were going through that actually led to the paying it forward initiative from Alan.
So basically, what I told, John and I, we started working together in Lullaby. I was actually his employee. And the relationship was tough at the beginning, no? Like I was, my English was not as fluent as now. And John, like he was somebody as well that he had a lot of relationship with a lot of celebrities. So, like he was not giving me attention and anybody attention. So, it was like, it was difficult. So at some point, I saw John like that he was just giving checks to everybody. He was spending a lot of money. Like the company had cash because they just raised money from an investor. So I saw like they were just burning cash. And one day I couldn't see the accounting. No, I didn't know the numbers, but I went to him and I asked him like, hey John, like I have the feeling that like that you're just burning cash. Like what's the situation of the company? Like I'm a little scared. I don't know the numbers, but I know how many cars we're renting every month. So I know the revenue, but I feel that you guys are going through a lot of money. So on that day, I told him like, John, like I feel that you do a lot of things. I know that I see that you're an amazing marketing person. I see that you're amazing, like having relationship with celebrities and in sales, and then I'm buying and selling these cars, but I don't think like John was somebody that he couldn't say no, like he had a conflict, like he was a super like conflict aversion, so he couldn't say no and he didn't like conflict. So I'm like, I'm not sure if you're good at accounting, so what do you do? So when I asked him that, I'm like, we had a big post-it, we were doing business plans at the time, sales plans. So I'm like, yeah, I got a piece of paper. I'm like, write everything that you do. So he makes a list of like 15, 20 things. I actually have the picture, took a picture of that. So he makes a list of 15, 20 things. And then I asked him like, what do you enjoy doing? And he marked four. That it was marketing, it was sales, what else? Dealing with the VIPs and just buying the cars. No, like that was what he loved. So I told him, like, John, like you in the list you have accounting, this, that, like managing the employees, like all these things of that you don't like doing. This is what I love doing, and that's what I'm good at. Like, why don't you allow me and you give me the opportunity to manage a company for you? So that's when we started working together, okay, and we had a lot of growing pains through that year, no, because like it was a new relationship. But the beautiful thing is that when I had access to the accounting, I realized that that year Lulavi was about to lose $800,000. So we started working together, and a year later Lulavi made, we turned it and made $80,000. It was not a fortune, but at least there was a big gap between what they were losing and what we were making now. What I have to say, is that like, how did we do that? So so when I was back in Spain, okay, like unfortunately, I had the opportunity to not unfortunately, fortunately, because thanks to that, I've grown so much. So I had the opportunity. My first real job was in a company, in a big company, jewelry company, where my boss, okay, he was super tough. I learned so much from this guy. I was the operations manager, and he was super tough on me. He taught me so much. But the environment in that company, it was a little toxic. He made me cry so many times, like, and I was already, I was an adult. A lot of people that they were reporting to me, they were crying. And I remember every time that my boss was like, Jordi, come here. I remember like my colleagues like, ooh, colonoscopy, because we had a room that we called it the colonoscopy room, which it can sound crazy, but it was a reality. So when I had the opportunity, and that's the way that that generation was leading. My dad, was leading the same way as well. My dad is an amazing person, but I remember he was in banking, like, and I think they were calling him Terminator, because like he was sent to open a new branch or something, and he was just like cleaning it up. And that's what I saw growing up. So when I had the opportunity to lead Lulavi, like, yes, we made a big change, but how? I was pushing my employees like crazy. Like I was pushing my vendors. I was selling I was renting the cars as the most expensive I could. So I was just pushing everyone. And And I was doing what I thought that I was supposed to do. But at the end of the day, nobody was happy. My employees were not happy. I was not happy. Nobody was happy. So that's but we turned the company. So John and I, he started respecting me a lot, and we started like just working together. At some point, it was like 1 plus 1, it was 4, and we started loving each other. So at some point, we turned the company starts making money, and into 70% of our revenue was coming from Brazil. We're here in Miami, and Miami used to, not after COVID, but used to depend a lot on Latin America. So when some countries in Latin America are doing well, Miami does amazing. When they are not doing well, Miami, so that in 2014-15, Brazil had a crazy, crazy recession. And in 2 3 months, boom, we lost like 60 70% of our business, like super quick. But we still had to pay our cars. Like we had to pay for the loans for our cars, we had to pay for our employees, for our showrooms, our insurance. So at some point, we get to that point where we're like losing money again, and we're struggling. So John and I, we stopped taking a salary so everybody else could make a salary. And at that point, I was not even a partner in the company. I was an employee, but we stopped taking salaries. But at that point, I see John. Now one day he buys like a $20,000 old Ferrari, and since we didn't have money, he buys it on a lease, putting like 10% down. And I'm like, at that point, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what is this guy doing? So we're not getting a salary. We don't know if next month we're gonna get a salary, and he's putting like 10% or 20% down, so $2,000 or $4,000 on a $20,000 Ferrari, old Ferrari. And I asked him like, what are you doing? And he says, like, Jordi, like this is an appreciating asset, because in our business, brand new Ferraris and Lamborghinis, they depreciate 20 to 30% a year. So, and he's like, no, this is an appreciating asset. This is a vintage car. I'm going to sell it and make some money. Okay. So a month later, he sells that car and he makes like $20,000. So I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. So since the company was struggling so much, I asked him like, hey, can we do this as a business? Like, could we do it? And he said like, yes, but I don't have money. Do you have money? So at that point, I called my friend, the one that brought me to Miami, Gerard. I'm like, hey, Gerard, we have an opportunity to buy a Lamborghini Countach for like $200,000, and John believes they can sell it for around 300. Like, would you lend me the money? So we do a deal where he's gonna make 70% of the profits. We're gonna make 30%, and we do our first car deal. And we actually, in 60 days, we buy that car for 200,000. We sell it for 300,000 or a little bit more. And my friend Gerard actually makes $90,000 with that 70%. So when I call him, I'm like, hey, where do I send the money? He's like, just keep it and keep doing it. So that year we started doing that, and that's how John and I were surviving without taking a salary. But at some point, like there's no deals, we're not making deals, and we're just struggling. And there's a day where I'm just like, I had to pay my attorneys, immigration attorneys. I had, like I couldn't afford my rent. John had pawned his watch, his Rolex, to be able to pay for the rent. So the situation was like super bad. And at that day, I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna call my dad and ask him to buy me a flight ticket, because I couldn't even buy a flight ticket to go back to Spain. And the beautiful thing is that since we met Alan in December 2014, he started calling us at night every 2 3 days, and talking to us and mentoring us. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what is this guy that has 15,000 employees and a $2 billion company doing, calling me at 10 11 p.m. at night and spending 2 3 hours on the phone with me? So Alan started like rewiring our brain a little bit, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, no? But he started talking about a different way to do business, a way where you lead from your heart, and things like that. So so that day, okay, I mean, in my company in Lulabi, I'm like, next morning when my dad wakes up, I'm going to call him. And yeah, 6 p.m. Alan calls, and Alan lives in Connecticut. And that day we had met in person maybe like 3 times that during that year, 3 4 times maximum, but we had spent like hundreds of hours on the phone. So he calls, he's like, hey, I'm in Miami. I'm the president of the US Parking Association. And I was in a parking convention and we just finished early. Like, would you guys want to have dinner with me? So we go, we have dinner with him. And he's like, how are you guys doing? How's the situation with the company? And we're actually telling him that we're going to shut down, that probably this month we're not going to make it. And I'm telling him that I'm going to call my dad tomorrow to buy me a flight ticket to go back to Spain, because I cannot afford rent. I'm not going to have a place to live. So that day, that same day in the morning, John, my business partner, that he's an eternal optimist. Okay, like he lives in another world. Like he doesn't live in this reality. He lives in another one. So that day, that morning, he came to me and he's like, "Brother, we're fine. We're gonna be rich." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I found a Lamborghini Miura that is $100,000, and I believe that I can sell it for $1.1 million." So I told him like, okay, where are we going to get the money from? Because like we were buying 50 to $100,000 cars. We're not buying like $1 million cars, and I didn't even know at the time that the car could be worth like $800,000 or a million. So he's like, oh, you're gonna raise the money. I'm like, no, John, I can't do that. So I told him that that was not gonna happen. So that night, okay, that Alan was in Miami, we're telling him our disaster, and then out of nowhere, John tells him like, no, no, Jordi's not going anywhere. We're gonna be rich. we're, we're gonna buy a car for $800,000 and we're gonna sell it for 1.1. So I was like, at that point, at that I was ashamed. I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, is he crazy? Like, Alan is not gonna take us serious. So Alan starts laughing like crazy, and I tell him like, I don't even listen. This is not gonna happen. We have to put a $50,000 deposit in the next 2 days, and we don't have a dollar, so it's just not gonna happen. So Alan is like, he's laughing. He pulls something from his bag and he starts writing, and I didn't know what he was writing. So he looks at me and he's like, hey, you're the money guy, right? And I'm like, yes. So he gives me a check. I look at the check and it was a $50,000 check. So he looks at me and he says like, tomorrow you're going to go to the bank, you're going to deposit this check. In the next 2 weeks you're going to raise the money, the 750, and then John is going to go and he's going to sell this car for $1.1 million. And when you have $150 in your account, okay, like I started crying. I couldn't stop crying. John starts crying. We're both crying. And I'm like, Alan, I cannot take this money. You're going to lose the money. It's a non refundable deposit, and you're going to lose the money. So so then he looked at me and he's like, did you read the check? I'm like, yes, I read it. It's like, read it better. And then I realized that in the memo, there was a note and it said paid forward. So he looks at me and he's like, do you know what paid forward means? I'm like, I guess, but I'm not sure. And he's like, I don't want you to pay me back. I want you to pay it forward. When you have the opportunity to help someone, you just do it. So I want you to do what I did for you today for other people. I want you to help your clients, your vendors, your employees, and anybody you can. So that was like the craziest lesson, that I got. And this is how everything started. Because like, if it wasn't for Alan, that he believed in me more than myself, I would have never raised the money. And I actually raised the money. Okay. I didn't believe that I was able, but I'm like, I have to do it, not for me, for him. So so I raised the money, and John sold that car for $1,240,000, which we made a massive profit. That was September 2015. And in December 2015, a year after meeting Alan for Art Basel as well, we did an event to launch our company, Curated Investments. And the cool part is that Curated Investments, like, like it was started like not to make money. That was not the goal of the company. The goal was to pay it forward, to help people, to create opportunities for people. And that's how everything started.
Incredible. What a story. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. So tell us how the concept of paying it forward has contributed to your sense of joy and fulfillment and has shaped your view and how you now approach the world.
Alan was, through that so many hours on the phone, he was bringing like every day he was bringing a different concept, and I loved it. I connected so much because, like, in my personal life, like my dad and my mom, they gave me like amazing values, and and that's what Alan was talking about. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that, but I didn't know that that was possible in business because, like, you always hear, "Oh, this is business," I'm like, and people separate the personal life from the business life, and this is how you live your life and this is how you do business. Not, at least this is how I always saw it in Spain, no. And Alan was talking like about managing business in a human way, and he was like, I remember one day he's like, I had two options, two potential vendors, and I didn't know which one to choose. And Alan is like, okay, so how are you going to impact the lives of the people that are working in those companies if you choose company one or if you choose company two? and I didn't get it. I'm like, I don't get it. What do you mean? And he's like, yeah, like if you choose company one, what's going to happen to those guys? And if you choose company two, what's going to happen? I'm like, well, company one, it's a big company, multinational company. Company two, it's a company like some younger guys here from Miami. I was like, so you have your answer. I'm like, what's my answer? Like the guys from Miami are a little bit more expensive than the other ones. And he's like, Jordi, like, wait, like he's like, your answer is that you're gonna choose company from Miami, because like the impact that you're gonna have on those people, on the people of that work in the company is gonna be way bigger. So Alan's like, like started putting in my brain, it's like, okay, like to take decisions based on the consequences that those decisions were gonna have in other people's lives instead of my life or my company, which it's crazy, like it can sound like easy, but for me at the beginning it was mind blowing. I was always thinking what was best for me and what was best for my company. So he starts introducing these concepts. I'm taking notes of everything in my phone. In my phone, like every night I had a different note, and then I was thinking and thinking and thinking about that. So so at some point, and you were asking me about that joy, so at some point, 3 years into the business, we had somebody walked in our showroom, and it was somebody from California that moved to Miami, and he heard about our company. So he walks in the showroom, he meets my business partner John. I was actually not there at that time. I was in Bali, in my brother's wedding. And when I come back, John is like, this person wants to meet both of us. So we meet with this guy, and he was Jim Getz, former CEO of Sequoia Capital, and he's super famous for the WhatsApp deal. He was the lead investor in WhatsApp, so a big billionaire. So we're talking with this guy, and he's like, I love you guys, like you're so different, because like John was like dressed with like a shirt with like 1,000 holes, and ripped jeans, and I'm with my sport jacket, like. So he's like, do you respect each other? He was shocked. So we told him like, that's the beautiful thing about us, that 1+1 is 4, and we respect each other. So he says like, hey, I would love to invest in you guys. So at that time the company was going to make the first $1 million. So we were not looking for investors, and we called Alan and we told him like, hey, there's this opportunity. So we had a meeting, the four of us. For Alan, the most important thing, okay, is that everybody needs to be a good person. So we have a rule in the company. I want to talk about this a little bit more later, but it's like the no asshole rule. So we meet with him. We make sure that Jimmy is not an asshole. And we love that guy. Alan loved him. We loved him. And he just wants to help. He's at the stage in his life that he wants to help young people be successful. So we signed a deal. And I always had the dream. I'm like, hey, I didn't have money. So I'm like, what's going to be the day that I sell a piece of my company and that I have money in my pockets for the first time? So I remember like that day, the day that John and I, we were at the office waiting for that wire to hit our account. And we had like a glass of tequila and we were waiting, boom, the money gets into the account. And we celebrate, we have a glass of tequila. And then I'm like, nothing happened. I go home that night. I'm like, wow, now I have money. I'm expecting a kid, a daughter. So fantastic. Okay. Like, it's great. But I didn't feel any like happiness. I was like normal. But next day, we go to the office. Okay. We decided to share a piece of the money with the employees. So we start calling our employees one by one, not based on the position, but the years that they had been working with the company. So the first one that we call is the guy that was cleaning cars, that he was with us from the Lullaby times, Marquis. So he comes and we give him a check that it was bigger than his annual salary. So, and we start doing this employee after employee. People are crying. They're like so happy and so thankful. And John and I were holding our tears. We're about to cry like crazy. So we finish. When the last employee leaves the room, we look at each other and we both start crying like crazy. We couldn't stop crying. And so that moment is when I realized everything that Alan had been teaching me for like 3-4 years, everything made sense. Because like having money, it didn't make me happy. But then giving it made me the happiest person in the world. That was the happiest moment that I had in my life, I believe, until that moment. After that, I had many, because I started living life in a different way. But for me, what you were asking, you were talking about joy. For me, joy was like, it's just about helping people unconditionally without expecting anything in exchange. And when you do that, like magic things happen. And what Alan always says, no, it's like when you have the opportunity to help someone, it's a gift. So just take that gift.
How amazing. And over the years, I understand that Alan has been mentoring you and John over the years in such a beautiful way. And you'll be actually including a lot of those insights in your new book. Tell us more about that.
So as I was telling you before, no, in the last, I had the opportunity to have Alan as a mentor, as a business partner, as a friend, as a second dad. Like today, our relationship is amazing. So for the last 10 years, through all these hours of telephone conversations, and I traveled the world with him. We did other businesses in other places, so I had the opportunity to travel with him, to spend a lot of time with his family. But we had vacations together with both families. So I've been taking notes. I was taking notes of everything that he was saying, because for me those concepts were so crazy. They were so beautiful, but were so crazy in the business world that I'm like, let me write this down. And I was just, every night when I was going to sleep, I was reading that. I'm like, okay, let me see how I can apply this to my life. So at some point, one day I was flying to Bali to visit my brother, and I decided to move everything from the notes from my telephone to a Word file. And I got inspired and I started like developing those concepts and writing. So I get to Bali and I had like a 40-page document with all of those things. So I kept like improving that document. So last year, it was Alan's, I think he was turning 64 or 65. So we were actually in Germany in a business trip. And the day that he was turning 64, we were at the airport. I'm like, I told him, like, I have a gift for you. So I gifted him a document with everything that I had learned from him in the previous like 7 or 8 years. So it was beautiful, no? And the name of the document was called Paid Forward, infusing unconditional love into business. That's what he does, and that's what he taught me. So I put together that document, I gave it to him. I never thought if it was going to be a book. I thought, oh, that could be cool, if it was a book or someday. But that was not my initial idea. The idea was to put everything in writing, gift it to Alan, and then started giving it to my employees so we could build a stronger culture in our company. But Alan was so excited that he started reading the first chapter to everybody that he met, his business partners, employees, like everybody. So one day, his business partner, Michael Hart, that he's actually the head of people and culture in Last Parking, he calls me and he's like, Jordi, like every year we choose a theme for Last Parking. The year before, it was creating opportunities for people. The previous year was never ever give up, and they always have a theme, and then the whole company works and does activities around that theme, which is beautiful. Imagine 15,000 employees creating opportunities for people and actively doing campaigns and doing things. So he calls me, it's like, we couldn't find a theme for this year, and you inspired us, and we would love to use Paid Forward as a theme for Last Parking, the largest parking company in the United States, for 2024. Like, we would love for you to come to our annual reunion. We would love for you to tell your story, and we would love for you to bring your book. And I'm like, what book? I don't have a book. I have like some papers. So thanks to Michael, okay, I decided to put together a book. I cleaned up the document. I went to the event. I told my story and I gave them like a draft. And yes, so in November, I'm going to be releasing the book, which actually I'm super, super excited.
Oh, I can imagine. Can you give us one example how some of the lessons that you've learned over the years have actually transposed in your own leadership style with your team today at Curated?
There's so many things that Alan taught me. No, the beautiful thing about the Curated today, no, is like the culture that we have. We were talking about the no asshole rule, no,
Yes.
before. That's a beautiful example, and that's something that a lot of people like when we have new employees, and I bring this up, and because we fire clients, like we yes, and they're like, wait, what are you doing? I'm like, we have a no asshole rule. So what? I'll give you an example. So at the beginning when we were starting, people started taking advantage of John and me. We were like two young 30-year-old kids, basically, dealing with these expensive cars, and people were pushing John. to get the best deal possible, to the point that we were almost not making money. And then we had a little service facility with one mechanic, and then they were just pushing us, like, to the point that we were losing money a lot of the times. So one day Alan told us, like, guys, you need to fire those clients. Do you know the no asshole rule? And we were like, no. It's like, okay, so you cannot do business with a bad person. So you have to have an authentic conversation with these people. And if they don't change, you need to fire them. So that was like, those clients were like 50% of our business, like our business was little. So those were like 2 3 clients that they accounted for like 50% of our business. So we told him that we couldn't do that, and he's like, you guys are doing it. So we decided to do it. And what happened is that, like, unfortunately, because when people scream, you end up investing more time on that people, okay, and not in the good people. So we fired those guys, and we started investing all that time in the people that care about us and that they were good people. So now we're taking care of these guys are bringing their friends, everybody's happy, the business starts booming. And because of applying the no asshole rule and firing these clients, the company exploded. And in a year, we went from 18 or $19 million in revenue to $60 million in revenue in 1 year. What happened? No asshole rule. Not only that, more things, but one of them, it was a no asshole rule. And it's the same thing with our employees. No, when we hire somebody, like, we need to make sure that they fit within our culture. And Alan always makes example, when we have dinner, we have the glass of wine and a glass of water. He puts a finger in a glass of wine, and he lets only one drop in the glass of water. And what happens? It changes the color. So just one person can destroy your culture. So one of the things that we do at our company is, we don't value our employees by performance. We value them by the values. Okay. And every quarter, each manager meets with the employee with the employees that they supervise. And we use a tool called the people analyzer. So basically, the manager writes his name and the employee's name, and then we put the 5 values: use your heart, own it, play the part, like our company's values. And then it's a plus, minus, or plus minus. And the partner rates himself and rates the employee. And then the employee does the same thing. The employee rates the manager and rates himself. And then there's a conversation. If somebody doesn't have at least 3 plus, okay, and 2 plus minuses, like, that's the minimum, you don't belong to the organization. So we're going to give you a chance to improve. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person, but you have a different set of values. So you just need to look for an organization where you fit. But definitely you don't fit in our organization. So we tell them, like, hey, those are our values, we want you to live by those values. But if you can't, you have to go. So in 3 quarters, if the person has not changed, they have to leave. And the thing is, like, for us, it's more important the values than the performance. Because if you have the values and you have the willingness to grow and to learn, in the long term, we're not here for the short term, we're here for the next 10, 20 years. So in the long term, you're going to be amazing, you're going to be great, you're going to be performing. So leave the values, and we're going to invest the time and the money and the efforts to make sure that you're going to be able to perform in the future. So those are like some examples of things that I got from Alan, and that we do in our company.
Since Curated, I know that you have also co-founded an electric vehicle company called Moke. What
Yes,
inspired you to create that company?
that's actually another project that we started. So that's the story is super funny. So Alan, okay, he used to vacation in San Barts in the Caribbean with his wife years ago. So he used to rent the old Mokes, and 6 7 no more, like, I think it was 2017. So he calls us and he's like, guys, I'm in St. Barts, and I just saw these Mokes, these brand new Mokes, they're so cool, and I just met the owner of Moke. They live in St. Barts, and I want to bring this to the United States. So it's like, I want you guys to fly to St. Barts. So John and I, we buy a flight ticket and we fly to St. Barts to meet with Alan, his family, and the owners of Moke. So we ended up putting together an agreement with the guys from Moke International to become partners and launch this project here in the United States. So, and that's what we've been doing for some years. It's been a challenging process. Like, there was a legislation that was supposed to pass in the United States. It ended up like taking like 6 and 7 years to pass. Finally, it passed, so now we can sell these cars legally. So, but we had to wait. It's been like, that's a conversation for another day. We can do a whole chapter just on this, but we learn a lot. And today we own a piece of Moke International, the company, and we're super excited about that.
That's awesome. So, if we talk now about joy, and if you could create a recipe for joy in people's lives, in your lives, what would be the three main ingredients?
The first one is what I said before, no? It's like when you focus on helping people from your heart unconditionally, and that's the most important thing. Unconditionally, like 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 that's what you experience. You experience joy because you're just doing it, like as an act of unconditional love. And when you do that, like it's a gift, like Alan says, it is a gift. So for me, the most important thing is just like this mindset change of like doing something to get something in exchange. That this is how I was before. I always loved helping people, but at some point I realized that I was helping them because I was expecting something in exchange. When I made this change, this is when I started experiencing joy and love, and it was like, oh my god. So that's the first thing, like help people from your heart
Mhm.
unconditionally without expecting anything in exchange. That at the end of the day, everything is going to come 10 times back. It's coming back.
Yeah.
But don't expect that. Just do it because you want to help. That's one thing. The other thing, I think that so we have to work a lot as human beings, okay, in growing personally and spiritually. And I think that's something else that has been important for me. Like when you can live in the present. I used to live in the past and in the future. I was always worried about the future. I'm not going to have enough money. This is going to happen. This is not going to happen. I was always worrying about the future. I went through a deep, like growing process in the last like 4 or 5 years, and I started like learning how to be present, how to be here and not in the past and not in the future. And when you do that, like you realize that life is beautiful, everything is amazing. Every morning I wake up, I go to the gym, I come back home. I have a cold plunge here, no? So I love to get 3 minutes in the cold water. And then while I'm warming up, I just meditate for 15 minutes. And when I finish my meditation, what I do, okay, I'm just like I think about all the good things that I have in my life. And when I open my eyes and I look the blue sky, the green, like plants, and I'm like, oh my god. I get home and I tell my wife, have you seen the sky? And she thinks that I'm crazy. I'm like, what did you take? What drug did you take? I'm like, none, but look at this. So when you do that and you're present, you realize that everything is beautiful. It's insane. And the other thing that I do is when I go to sleep, okay, I sleep, I lay down, I take 3 deep breaths, and then I just think about the 3 good things or the 3 best things that happened in that day. And I let everything that can come to my mind. It can be something super little, super stupid, but whatever comes, and I feel the emotion in my body, and oh my god, I go to sleep with a smile. So that's all. I think that for me it's like being present, and two, just helping people from your heart unconditionally.
I love that. And talking about your wife, tell us about the big project that you have planned for next year with was also your daughters.
Yes, so I'm a little crazy. So I'm a dreamer. So when I was a little kid, and like there's sometimes that you have, and you don't know why, you don't remember a lot of things about your when you were a kid, but there's some things that are boom, they are there, and you don't know why. So I have one of those moments. No, I was 7 or 8 years old, and we were sailing on a sailboat, friends of my dad's sailboat. So I remember being there, and I in the front of the boat by myself, and I lay down, and I could feel like I hear the water, shh, shh, and I could feel the breeze and the sails and the sun. And I was like, I had like a moment, I had like I don't know, like a moment that I could never forget that moment. So I always had a crazy connection with the ocean, with the sailing, with the noise, with the sails. I was sailing as a kid, and one day I realized and I saw that there were people crossing the Atlantic. And then years later I realized that there were people like me circumnavigating the globe. So I'm like, okay, so it's possible to do circumnavigation. Somebody opened my eyes and inspired me. So when I met my wife, I told her, one day, okay, like you need to know that before you marry me. Like one day, I'm gonna circumnavigate the world. I want to do it with you. And if we have kids, I want to do it with them as well. But if you don't want to do it, it's fine. I'm not going to push you. I just want you to know that one day I'm going to do it. And when I'm ready, I want you to respect it and support me. So when 2 or 3 years later we got married, and in the vows she said like, I want to do this with you. Okay, we're going to do it together. We're going to do it as a family. So basically it's been some years from that, And we decided that September 2025, next year, we're going to start a circumnavigation around the world with my wife and my two little daughters. And I'm super excited to spend so much time with my daughters to show them the world, because we live in a little bubble here in Miami. It's a beautiful city, it's an amazing place, but it is a bubble. It's not the real world. So I want them to see that.
How amazing. And talking about exposing your young kids to the world, what do you believe we need to do collectively to actually bring more joy and harmony into our everyday lives?
So I think that everybody can do something to change the world. Actually, yesterday, I'm part of a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, no, and we had an event that it was beautiful, no, and there was this guy telling his story, no? And it was a black guy, okay, that came from like being super poor, like bad neighborhoods, no, and thanks to his mom that started like like using a different address, she was able to have him go to schools in other neighborhoods, no, and then he ended up like in his family he had like 50 cousins, something like that. He's the only one that went to college, and in college, okay, because he didn't believe that he could go to college, so he's in college and he's not been like super successful. And there's a teacher that goes to him, okay, and tells him like you. You're the best student that I have, or something like that, when it was not even true. So he was telling us like this guy, okay, this teacher that I had like that 2 minute conversation changed my life, because he didn't realize that he made me believe that I could do that, no. And we were talking about angels yesterday, who's our angel, and he was talking about his mom and this guy. So somebody with like a 2 minute conversation can have a crazy impact on somebody's lives. Personally, myself, what I believe, so we're working at least 8 hours a day, okay, in a company, and people say, oh, this is my private life and this is my business, my job. 80% of the people that go to a job, they are going there for money, for a paycheck. They don't go there because they love it. So that's what we need to change, and that's my mission. In my company, for example, we do coaching, we do group coaching with the employees, we do meditation, we do retreats, we do breath work, we do hypnosis, we do a lot of things. So we want to help our employees grow, find their purpose and live their purpose within our organization. So our organization has a purpose, and we need to make sure that everything aligns so they can be happy. So imagine, like, my company has 28 employees. It's a little company, so it's 28 employees, but if every employee has 4 people at their home, and then these guys, so if they get home happy and excited and they don't have problems, and they're, imagine the impact that we have. So if we can have, like, I don't know, 100, a million companies doing that, the impact that we can have is massive. Unfortunately, everybody needs to go to work. We all need to make a living. So I think, for me personally, and my goal is, I want to change, or I want to help change the humanity through business. I believe that we can have a massive impact by teaching people how to do business in a different way.
I love that. One final question. What is your purpose, and what advice would you have for someone that is looking to find theirs?
So what I love in life, okay, it's growth. I'm obsessed about growth, no? Like myself, like I cannot stop learning and doing things. My wife sometimes is like, hey, you need to relax because I'm just like always looking for something new. But and I love growth. I love to see people grow, and I love to see companies grow. So for me, my purpose, I wanna do what I told you. I wanna help people find their purpose and make sure that they can live their purpose within the organizations that they work in. So like, and that's it, and that's my purpose.
Beautiful. Any final words of wisdom that you may wish to share with our audience as it relates to joy and living more purposefully and more joyfully?
For me, it's like, what changed my life, it was just be present, enjoy the moment. Like, we have a lot of worries and we're worrying all day long, but like 80% of those things will never happen. The likelihood of that happening is so little. So why are we worrying? Let's not waste 80% of our lives worrying. Let's be present. Let's enjoy the moment. And I know that it's not easy. It's difficult. Okay, but there's tools, and there's so much information online, and there's so many things that you can do to start in this path of worrying less and being present, enjoying life, and being grateful. Like, when you're grateful, like, you see life in a different way. So for me, that's the most important thing. This is where the shift starts happening.
So beautiful. Jordi, it's been an immense pleasure to spend this time with you. And thank you so much for sharing your beautiful story and for inspiring our listeners.
No, thank you so much for the opportunity to share my message and the time with you. Thank you so much.